Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Christopher Rose. I'm a doctoral student in history at the University of Texas. And I'm here this morning to raise serious concerns about Worldview Software's submission for the World History course and to express my opinion that these materials should not be adopted. They are poorly written, both in the sense that they present incorrect information as well as containing numerous grammatical and typographical errors. They consist of a jumble of names, dates, and facts that are not correlated to any identifiable set of educational standards. Among the many problems that I have found are a statement that, and I quote, "South of the Sahara Desert, most of the people before the age of explorations were black Africans of the Negro race," end quote. Even assuming the author meant to use the word Negroid, which is the correct anthropological term, this type of racial classification fell out of fashion in the 1940s. Elsewhere, students are told that, again I quote, "The Romans preserved classical Greek culture but did not make any significant contributions themselves to science or mathematics," which is obviously untrue. An essay prompt asked the students to explain why the Aztec, Inca, and Maya did not achieve a list of scientific and mathematical accomplishments, even though they in fact achieved every one listed. At various points in the text, Catholicism is treated as a separate religion from Christianity, and it is stated that Jesus is revered in Judaism. A study question about the Boston Tea Party says that American colonists did not want representation in the British Parliament because it was too far away, making colonial rallying cry of no taxation without representation incomprehensible. D-Day, the Vietnam War, and the Holocaust are only covered in a subsection on art, as a backstory to monuments or photographs depicting these events. Finally, this text states that President Bush blamed al-Qaeda for the 9/11 attacks, as though this was his personal opinion and not a matter of historical fact. I have many more specifics in my written testimony, but I urge the board to look carefully at this text and the way it fabricates and misrepresents history, and to recommend against its acquisition for Texas schools. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mustafa Akir. I'm the Executive Director for the Council on American Islamic Relations in Houston. We have been made aware of several errors in regards to Islam and Muslims in several of the texts. First of all, social studies, school service, active classroom, world history. The text states, quote, "Much of the violence you hear or read or hear about in the Middle East is related to jihad." This is wrong. The broad charge effectively blames Islam for a very complex cycle of violence while ignoring a host of other factors. Additionally, the majority of Muslims understand jihad as struggle for good to fight corruption, poverty, and oppression. And this text glosses over that. Worldview Software, World History B, mid-1800s to present, the text states, the spread of international terrorism is an outgrowth of Islamic fundamentalism, which opposes Western political and cultural influences in Western ideology. What's wrong with this is that the statement about international terrorism is inaccurate and misleading. Not all international terrorism is an outgrowth of Islamic fundamentalism. Terrorist groups with national and political agendas have formed on every part of the world. For example, the Irish Republican Army grew from the quest by Irish Catholics to form an independent republic rather than being part of Great Britain. Jewish Zionist terrorists, notably by the Zionist Haganah, Irgun, and Stern gang groups, committed acts of terror in their quest to establish the Jewish state, among many others. Religiously motivated terrorism is just a tool that these folks will use to galvanize the masses. One other very important issue, an image of Muslim women wearing chadors, a large piece of cloth that is wrapped around the head and the upper body, leaving only the face exposed, is also incorrect. This is McGraw-Hill School Education World Geography. The first question asks whether, can I finish that statement?
Yes, please.
Okay. The first asks whether the chattel affects women's interaction in public. The suggested answer is the chattel limits women's interaction in public and makes them indistinguishable from one another and inhibits any kind of contact. And the second question asks, what does the chattel reveal? That even in countries that claim there's equality for women, religious law still hinders women's rights. As part of their groundbreaking 6-year project, Gallup conducted tens of thousands of interviews with residents in more than 35 predominantly Muslim nations and found that Muslim women didn't see it as a hindrance.
Okay, Mr. Carroll, if you'll wrap up and then you might have a question.
Okay.
So maybe one last sentence?
Yeah,
and
they didn't see it as a hindrance to their rights.
then, okay, thank you. Okay.
Hi, today I speak on behalf of the Dallas Jewish Community Relations Council, the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas, and the Jewish Federation of Fort Worth and Tarrant County. These organizations represent all major Jewish organizations and synagogues in the Metroplex area. These organizations also work with their counterparts throughout the state of Texas. We submitted reviews for textbooks by the Institute for Curriculum Services, National Resource Center for Accurate Jewish Content in Schools. ICS is a national initiative of the San Francisco Bay Area JCRC and the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, which is the Jewish community's national public policy arm representing 125 community relations councils and 14 national organizations. ICS promotes accurate content and materials regarding Jews, Judaism, and Israel throughout the United States. For the last 5 years, I've worked with most of you, as well as Texas educators throughout the state, to promote accuracy about Jews, Judaism, and Israel in Texas educational resources. Our text reviews center on that same goal within the context of the approved TEKs. On behalf of the Jewish community, we appreciate and thank you for providing publishers with strong TEKs about the Holocaust, which some of you may remember was actually removed from the first iteration of the U.S. history TEKs. Faith-defining holidays such as Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur rather than minor festivals like Hanukkah, and inclusive timelines of Jewish history in Israel. However, the Jewish community in Texas does have serious concerns about specific textbooks listed in the cover letter of our review, which I have included with my remarks for your handout. We cannot in good faith support the adoption of those textbooks in their current form. Accordingly, we ask for the adoption of those books be made contingent on the publisher's agreement to make corrections along the lines recommended in our reviews. At the same time, we want to thank publishers who made improvements to their textbooks, resulting in more accurate learning resources for all Texas students. Our reviews were also sent to the publishers as we look forward to working collaboratively in pursuit of our goal of producing accurate and balanced instructional materials. On behalf of the Dallas Community Relations Council, the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas, the Jewish Federation of Fort Worth and Tarrant County, and members of the Jewish community throughout Texas, I thank you very much for your time, consideration, dedication, and ensuring high quality for all Texas students.
Awesome.
I'd like to speak to an issue where I don't think the TEKs are being given enough attention in evaluating the textbooks, and that is the memorization of basic fundamental facts. You can't get into the prayer of that. Let me give you a couple of supporting evidences first. In international testing, the U.S. keeps falling further behind Asia and Europe. Recently tested 32nd in math and 23rd in science, and the average overall subject is again 23rd. That's not very good, folks. It's not what we intend to accomplish. Supporting that also is that the American businesses increasingly seek to hire Asians and Europeans, especially in STEM areas where I've been a professional for so many years. You can tell that industry can see the difference. It's not just theoretical. It's not just a problem with the test. It's a problem with the people coming in. The Europeans and Asians actually outperform. And we keep trying to fix the problem with money over the last 30 years.
Mr. Mayor, do you have anything on textbook content? Because that's what this public hearing is.
My name is Jacqueline Jones. I'm a professor of history at the University of Texas at Austin, where I chair the history department. I received my PhD in history from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Between 2011 and 2014, I taught more than 1,000 UT students in the second half of the introductory American History Survey. I speak here today representing only myself. My comments will focus on the Pearson text, United States History 1877 to the present Texas. I believe this text adheres closely to the TEK standards, and this provides a good indication of the way those standards shape teaching materials for public school students here in Texas. In sum, though, the materials presented here distort history in several ways. First, the text is replete with biases that are either outside the boundaries of established mainstream scholarship or just plain wrong. Second, these biases lead to the omission of crucial facts. And third, the standards mandate the highlighting of certain arguments that the evidence in the text in fact refutes, leading to a great deal of confusion in the reader. This is especially the case with the standards that promote the significance of the American free enterprise system. For example, the relentless glorification of this system produces contradictions in the text and will no doubt prove confusing to the students. The authors claim that the U.S. has close to a pure market economy, one that contrasts with the socialist mixed economy. Considering the skepticism with which the authors discuss governmental programs of any kind, they are invariably portrayed as misguided. We would expect to see the text discuss the invisible hand of government. However, the text does provide considerable information on the way government initiatives promoted the interest of business in substantial and material ways. Land subsidies and tax breaks gave boosts to private railroad companies. Tariffs protected American businesses from foreign competition. We do our students a disservice when we scrub history clean of unpleasant truths, and when we present an inaccurate view of the past that promotes a simple-minded, ideologically driven point of view.
Good morning. My name is Manpreet Singh, and I'm a litigation attorney from Houston, Texas. I was born and raised there, so I'm a proud Houstonian. I graduated from University of Texas with a history major where I met my husband. We have 2 beautiful boys, and so I just want to be able to say that I'm a vested Texan in the interest of our children's future. And after hearing just like this in 2009, you listened and you included Sikhism in the social studies TEKS. However, I ask you that you take a next look and a further look into the errors that have been portrayed in the current draft of the textbooks. There's at least 40 factual errors in these books, and we have resources that can prevent these errors from going to print. And so I think it's prudent for this board and for us as Texans to correct these errors and give our children accurate information. And as an illustration, I'd like to point out one of the most egregious errors to articulate my point. McGraw-Hill World Geography textbook, Teacher's Edition, it says that the Sikh religion is based on the Hindu devotion to Vishnu and Muslim Sufis. The statement is absolutely false. And when I say it's false, I mean that no portion or part of it is true. Sikhism is the 5th largest religion in the world, as you know when you adopted this, population of 27 million. And with that stance of it being its own belief and faith tradition, it is by no means a derivative of any other religion, and it must stand on its own.
My sons both wear a smaller version of the turban called a patka, and they are constantly asked about the Sikh religion as well as that turban by the teachers and fellow students. Before 2010, my wife would visit our son's schools and talk to the teachers and the students about our religion as well as the patka that my kids wear. Then when Sikhism was included in the text in 2010, there was more awareness that came about in the teachers. But then my wife and I, they continued to work with the Sikh Coalition to present information to the social studies teachers at several conferences here in Austin, because the information was not yet there in the textbooks. It was mandated that the school teach about the religion, but not there was no information available. Actually, I'm going to skip over that a little bit and just go to the issue. Basically, we are very proud Sikh Americans, and are grateful for the opportunity that this country has given us. We celebrate American holidays as well as Sikh holidays, and that is why we are so excited to see that Texas students in the 6th grade will learn about our Sikh holiday called Vaisakhi. Specifically in the 6th grade McGraw-Hill World History textbook, the description of Vaisakhi only includes the cultural significance of Vaisakhi, not the religious. And since the 6th grade text about Vaisakhi asks that students learn about the significance of this religious holiday, we ask that you include that significance in this textbook as well. We have suggested alternative language in the textbook in our chart on page 7.
My name is Dr. Amy Jo Baker. I'm a retired social studies director from the San Antonio School District, and I served 40 years on behalf of our students in the state. I'd like to come before you today to ask that you correct, or ask the publishers to correct some of the omissions of fact, bias, half-truths, and errors in the textbooks, because I think our students deserve textbooks that are historically accurate and not politically correct. An example is a Pearson 6th grade textbook that says a small number of Muslims in the region see European and American influence as a threat. They've adopted a form of Islamism that draws on the tradition of jihad. And the word jihad in Arabic simply means struggle. And for many Muslims, it can refer to the struggle to be a better person. And then they go on to say that some extremist groups say it's violent jihad. Ladies and gentlemen, for the Islamists, jihad does not mean the struggle to be a better person. In the Quran, the term jihad has usually meant the meaning to wage war. The great collections of the Hadith all contain a section devoted to jihad in which the military meaning predominates. The same is true of the classical manual of Sharia law. The overwhelming majority of classical theologians, jurists, and traditionalists understand the obligation of jihad in a military sense. And it's one of the commandments of the Muslim faith. This obligation is without limit of time or space. It must continue until the whole world has either accepted the Islamic faith or is submitted to the power of the Islamic State.
So on one hand, you can see that the text devotes more attention to one side of the conflict than the other. The portion of section 3, which is devoted to Israel, begins, "If you lived here," inviting the student to imagine themselves on one side of the conflict. It's followed by individual sections on history with subheads like the Holy Land and creation of Israel, Israel today with subheads which are government and economy, cities, diversity and languages, cultural and rural settlements, covering 3 pages. The portion of section 3 devoted to the Palestinian territories does not begin, "If you lived here," and it's followed by individual sections on Gaza, West Bank, East Jerusalem, the territories today, and that's it.
Good morning. I'm Admiral Greiner of the Texas Navy and Marines. I petitioned the State Board of Education in 2009, including to teach for the first time in Texas history, the history of the Texas Navy, and the history of the Commodore of the Texas Navy, Edwin Lloyd Moore. However, the publishers, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, McGraw-Hill, and Pearson Prentice Hall have not seen fit to honor the SBoE's new mandate with truthful, well-researched material. The publishers' submissions are false and inaccurate, inconsistent with each other, poorly researched, redundant, and negative to the extent of excluding important contributions of the Texas Navy to the Republic of Texas and the state of Texas. In your package before you, there's a letter detailing a review of the publishers' enclosed submissions and a reference list with bibliography proving the falsity and inaccuracy of the publishers' submissions. Also enclosed is a color brochure detailing the immensely important contributions of the Texas Navy to Texas, which should be included in any history of the Texas Navy. Most importantly, a particular naval battle which ensured statehood for Texas was the Naval Battle of Campeche on May 16, 1843. This is the only naval battle in world history where sailing ships, namely the Texas flagship, the Austin, defeated 2 steamships of war, the Guadalupe and the Montezuma. They controlled the Gulf of Mexico and did not allow Mexico to come and defeat Texas after that, after their operations in 1843. Also, Commodore Moore saved Sam Colt from bankruptcy when the U.S. Army would not buy his new Colt revolvers. He purchased these revolvers for use by the Texas Marines. After operations of the Texas Navy ceased, these same revolvers were given to the Texas Rangers, which went on to become the gun that saved the West. If not for the Texas Navy, this would have never occurred. This has been accepted by the Texas Department of Transportation in their Quick Look publication. Also, there's another one that is false, is the claim that the first shots fired in the Texas Revolution were fired at Gonzales. This is not true. They were fired by a Texas ship, the San Felipe. I will finish very quickly.
Thank you.
The San Felipe off the mouth of the Brazos against the Correo de Mexico. They took the ship as a prize and turned those ammunition and goods over to the Texian army. If not for the control of the Gulf of Mexico, we would never become a republic and we would never become a state.
Good morning. My name is David Brockman, and I have a PhD in religious studies from Southern Methodist University, where I also teach world religions. I'm also a Christian theologian, and I teach courses at Bright Divinity School. I reviewed 7 world history texts and 11 geography textbooks. I focused on the balance and accuracy of their coverage of world religions. First, I'd like to thank the board for giving religion a strong presence in the social studies TEKS. Students can't fully understand the history of our world if they don't understand the religions of our world. However, it is equally important to present all religions fairly and accurately. While some of the textbooks do well, many have significant factual errors that interfere with student learning. I'll mention 2 examples of the errors I found in the textbooks. These and other errors are listed on the handout, and scholars like footnotes, so I have footnoted the page numbers and the textbooks as well. Some texts paint Islam as more violent than it actually is. One textbook tells students that, quote, Muslims spread their religion by conquest, end quote, and that's a half-truth. Islam also spread by trade and missionary work. Another text wrongly reduces jihad to holy war and blames Muslims for the violence in the Middle East. And these factual errors interfere with student learning about Islam. On the other hand, most geography textbooks portray the spread of Christianity, my own religion, as more peaceful than it was. One states that Europeans, quote, brought Christianity with them to the Americas and spread it among the indigenous people, end quote. Well, that suggests that the conversion of the Native Americans was peaceful and voluntary, whereas quite often it involved coercion and violence. Leaving out that side of the story interferes with student learning. And I think our students deserve better, and I respectfully urge the board to correct these factual errors. Thank you.
Dr. John Quinney was unable to be here today. He was teaching a course at Rice University, so I'll be speaking and reading his testimony. I am a postdoctoral fellow in Indian Studies at the University of Houston, where I teach a course on Asian religions and history and culture. I have a PhD in religious studies from Columbia University in 2011, and before that I earned a Master's of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary and was approved to become a Lutheran pastor. I grew up in rural Wisconsin, the son of farmers. As a teacher in a public university now, I work with a lot of students who have come through the Texas public school system. I obviously want them to arrive at college with accurate information about the world, so it's in all of our interest to make sure the school textbooks are free from basic mistakes, such as the ones the Sikh Coalition had pointed out. It saves our students from pointless confusion. I also see in some of my students who come from towns in Texas that University of Houston can be an intimidating world full of different kinds of people they've never met or seen before. Growing up on a farm in Wisconsin, I relate to this as well. Public school was the main channel through which I learned about the greater world outside. It's important that the young students know about people of other faiths, especially ones which made many adherents like Sikhism, Islam, and Hinduism. One day they'll be classmates, co-workers, and neighbors with these students. This knowledge is necessary in pressing in already diverse school systems to prevent bullying, especially of Sikh boys who visibly stand out as easy potential targets. Finally, as a scholar of religion and history, I need to address the problem of referring to Sikhism as being a blend of Hinduism and Islam, which appears in the McGraw-Hill World Textbook, History Textbook, Student-Teacher Edition, as well as the McGraw-Hill World Geography for Students. All religions have its historical context and conversation with people around them, but for communities who have identified themselves as independent and separate for centuries like Sikhs, it's incorrect and offensive for the reader to blend them as a product of others. I doubt we would allow any textbook to claim that Christianity is a blend of Hebrew prophecy and Greek prophecy. Sikhism must not be represented this way either. After combing through all Pearson, Houghton, Mifflin, Harcourt, and McGraw-Hill draft textbooks that mention Sikhs, we have found over 40 factual errors. We have detailed those errors and suggested new text in its place, and for your review, I have included a chart in a binder that we are distributing to all board members today under tab 2, Factual Errors About Sikhs and Draft Social Studies Textbooks.
I found 5 issues in 3 textbooks that I've read, and I want to bring those to your attention real quick. First was the changing of BC and AD. We already discussed that. Americans do not need or sanction this change, and the 3 textbooks I read have BC and AD taken out of the textbooks. Second one is evolution. Evolution is a theory and cannot be considered fact. Continuous one-sided bias of man evolving. Our children have the right to know they did not necessarily evolve from a bug. Nationalism is what caused Hitler and the genocide he inflicted. Chapter 1 of Worldview, World History B, has a picture of a Navy officer saluting the American flag on board a ship, and yet there's no reference to America in this chapter. Why? Because there is no nationalism as they describe it in America. We are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the textbook does give a definition, but uses the word incorrectly. The fourth one is textbooks throughout challenges beliefs instead of presenting facts and allowing the student to decide. Omission of facts and half-truths do not tell the whole story. The use of Palestine throughout history is a factual error in these textbooks. Enough said. This is a history book which should take every opportunity to find the most up-to-date facts possible so our children have the chance to learn from mistakes made in the past. How many times can a person be lied to before they no longer trust the person speaking? America is the greatest country that ever existed. An American textbook needs to put pride in our children, as is their right. History should and must reflect the positive as well as the negative and allow our children to dream and open their minds to wonderful and new opportunities. Our forefathers were great thinkers who through their faith established a foundation for the American way of life. I don't see people flocking to Russia or Arabia or Africa. I see people flocking to America. Our values are what make us great. The author of this textbook leads the reader to devalue the good in America.
A good historian understands that one perspective is not enough to paint an accurate picture of the events of our past. I find it ironic that if a certain demographic today were writing our history right now, they would talk of an invasion coming from our south, an invasion of Hispanic children, unarmed, uninterested in conquest, just a decent life and a chance. But try to explain to those same people that European settlers were not only invaders of a kind, but invaders with advanced weaponry and an intent to take over. I am proud to be a Texan, and I am proud I live in this great nation of ours, but I can't say that my pride extends so far as to sully another person's heritage, because I don't necessarily like what it implies about some of my ancestors. We need qualified individuals and historians to review our textbooks, and not individuals who will rewrite history simply because it is not in sync with their ideological opinions.
Latinos need their community leaders in the history books too. Don't cut them out, but add them in the books. Don't color everyone with the same color brush.
So I'm going to add to the litany of objections to the worldview text on world history. Need I say more? Yes. First of all, our first speaker, Chris Rose, objected to the passage that south of the Sahara Desert, most of the people before the age of explorations were black Africans of the Negro race. And he objected to that, and so do I. The idea that everyone native of Africa prior to the age of exploration can be constituted under a single taxonomic category is archaic, is typological thinking, and was expunged from the anthropological literature sometime in the middle of the 20th century. So we should not raise that issue again. The other passage that I want to comment on is a passage above that reads, "The first known inhabitants of Africa north of the Sahara in prehistory were Caucasoid Hamitic peoples of uncertain origin." The notion of a Hamitic people as a racial group is a survival of discredited early anthropological writers and explorers who claimed that the descendants of the biblical Ham had migrated west and south into Africa. And so that is a discredited term that should not be used. It is legitimate to refer to Hamitic speakers because they do constitute a language family, but even that can be misleading. Most acceptable, therefore, would be simply the elimination of Caucasoid as a subcategory and the replacement of Hamitic peoples with Hamitic speakers, or simply the elimination of that. And it could well be said that most of the continent before the age of exploration was populated by native Africans, and that the Africa north of the Sahara was populated by migrants who came in from the east. That would be satisfactory. So I think we need to stay away from the use of racial terms when referring to human groups or subgroups, because it has no scientific and certainly no biological merit.
The books from McGraw-Hill, Perfection Learning, and various others, including Pearson, reportedly promote the idea that Moses definitely existed, where this should be taken as a matter of faith, and that he somehow inspired the U.S. Constitution, and this is a pervasive falsehood, frequently repeated, even though we can prove that that's not true. The list of commandments beginning in Exodus 20 had no determinable influence over the formation of the American legal system. Killing and stealing were already illegal universally in every system of government, even prior to the alleged time of Moses. And apart from them, none of the other commandments in the list that is commonly and erroneously labeled the 10 have ever been represented in the laws of this land. Moses is a compilation of at least a few legendary heroes and evidently never existed otherwise. He is no more a historic figure than King Arthur. Even rabbinical scholars now admit that there is an archaeological consensus that the way the Bible describes the Exodus is not the way it happened, if it happened at all. And then, as had been mentioned previously, worldview software mentions a Hamitic race which never existed. It was imagined out of nothing and imagined to have come from an imaginary person. 19th century bigots refused to accept that the civilization of Egypt could have been built by, quote, Negroes, which is a wholly inappropriate pejorative for a textbook. These type racial classifications were rejected initially by Darwin, shortly after by Boas, and then the whole of anthropology. We in the 21st century must, of course, reject it also.
I have actual field experience working with children with the social studies TEKS, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, mostly inner city. Okay. We're talking about what Texas should include in our history books today to educate its students. Of course, what happens in Texas today is the history of tomorrow. Right now, according to U.S. Census information, the face of Texas is changing. In fact, it has already happened in Texas. In 2011, Texas became one of the 5 majority-minority states for the first time ever in Texas history. Minority populations accounted for 90% of the growth. In a 2013 article in County Magazine, Michael Klein, the Associate Director of the Hobby Center for the Study of Texas at Rice University, said that improving educational attainment levels for all races and ethnicities and lower-income residents is one of the most important investments the state can make today to ensure it remains economically strong in the future. Education is vital to the growth of our economy. As one population is aging and shrinking, the largest population will be younger and has been historically economically disadvantaged. That means that we are all in this together. In order to replace shrinking revenue from the older Anglo population, the state needs a better educated workforce. I have to admit, as I studied for this hearing, I wasn't surprised by the inaccuracies in the state standards that I'm sure others will point out that this board adopted. What did surprise me was how major publishers bowed to political pressure to put the demonstrably inaccurate claims in the textbooks. Not just the crank obscure publishers, but major publishers that dominate the country's textbook market. However, let's say inaccurate textbooks are approved for our students, particularly the whitewashing by some of the publishers of minority historical events like segregation to downplay the hardships minorities face to win equal rights. Where's the harm in that? That is from McGraw-Hill. Not only is that insulting to populations that make up the strong backbone of the state, our students won't be able to pass a college or university history class. They need to earn a college diploma. And with less college graduates, that hurts the entire state economy. History will judge us for what happens here today. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Brad.
Just to be consistent, do you have any specific examples, specific textbooks?
Yes, I do.
You provided that?
It is McGraw, pardon me, I'm a little nervous.
You're doing great.
No, you're fine.
Okay. McGraw-Hill School Education, United States Government. McGraw-Hill is one of the top 10 publishers in the world. And I can read you the specific.
No, I just want to make sure that you have specific books,
Yes.
specific passages that you feel are errors, and we get that submitted.
What I feel is it is the passage on segregation in McGraw-Hill is biased, and it whitewashes the history of segregation to say that some African American students received a poor quality education and some did not.
But that's bias, is that an error?
Yes, and history bias is an error. It isn't accurate to represent a historical event through a biased lens.
Well, thank you for defending your position.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me be here today. My name is Emily McBurney. I'm from Temple, Texas. Starting in June, I began reading Edmentum and also Worldview A and B, World History A and World History B. And I've spent approximately 25 to 30 hours a week since June, and I'm not a paid lobbyist, but I'm very interested in education and children, as all of you are, and I really appreciate your being on this board. I had a couple of quotes from the books that you have before you, and one of them was already mentioned, that the Worldview, World History A said that the Romans preserved classical and Greek Hellenistic culture, but did not make any significant contributions themselves to science or mathematics. Yikes. The second comment I had was about Karl Marx. They had a couple of paragraphs praising his historical value in this textbook, and that he was a great economist, historian, and no mention of the fact that because of his teachings, even though that was true, that he was an economist, it's not clearly telling the results of communism or his ideas, and that we all know that the result of his teachings was the millions of innocent people have been killed in cold blood. And my next quote was that the book Worldview A has Buddha and Confucius with 28 lines of text, Jesus Christ with 8 lines of text. Worldview B has given Mrs. Clinton, Hillary Clinton, 60 lines of text with 38 successes and no failures, no mention of Ronald Reagan, and 26 lines of text for George W. Bush, 6 failures and no successes.
I found the texts World History A and B to be inaccurate in their definitions and examples of democracies and republics. First, in the text, the United States of America is referred to as a democracy and not a republic. In World History B, Chapter 5, it stated, democracy most commonly refers to a political system of government by elected representatives which guarantees its citizens the right to vote, protect civil liberties, and provide justice. This is in error. Democracy is a government by majority rule. You can see the quotes that I've given. Our government is not a democracy. A democracy is destructive of liberty because there is no law to stop the majority from running over individual rights. A lynch mob is an example of pure democracy in action. There is only one dissenting vote, and that is cast by the person at the end of the rope. Our government is a republic. The word republic means the law. A republic is a form of government under a constitution. Under this system of government, a lynch mob is illegal. The suspected criminal cannot be denied his right to a fair trial, even if a majority of the citizenry demands otherwise. In the text of World History A, they discuss Athens and the Greek Solon. And it says about Solon, he made political changes that evolved into the Athenian democracy. This is backwards. The Athenian democracy was modified when they adopted some of Solon's ideas to establish a more republican form of government. Okay. Also, Rome is lacking in description. In conclusion, these texts are inaccurate and lacking in crucial detail. The bare bones overview and piecemeal approach, finding some information in the glossary or the chronology or the notable people section, does not allow a flow of continuity, and it does not give the reader a true understanding of history. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Kathy Miller.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Mr. Bradley?
I noticed on our sign-up sheet, we used to ask to designate whether or not a speaker is a registered lobbyist. Has that been dropped?
No, that question is asked. I checked yes.
in the form.
Maybe it just wasn't
It's-
printed, could we?
It's not presented to us as such.
Oh, sorry.
And so you've answered my question. You are a registered lobbyist?
I am a registered lobbyist.
A hired gun?
What was that?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so it does list their affiliation, but. All right, go ahead.
Well, I'm not sure if I'll be able to. My name is Kathy Miller. I'm the president of the Texas Freedom Network. Earlier today, I prepared testimony based on the process you have adopted for your textbook approval. And earlier today, you said you weren't going to hear about the process. That opinion has been partially enforced throughout the day, so I don't know if you'd like to listen to me now talk about your process or tell me when I will be able to publicly comment on it.
Okay, well, it's an agenda item for tomorrow, so in hearing from staff, it's who we've been hearing from, it was with the intent of using that information for tomorrow, but we should specifically, from testifiers, be talking about the content of the textbook. I have let staff give information about the process, yes.
So I should register to testify tomorrow about the process, is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Today is about the content of the book.
And has that registration closed?
No, you can still test, you can still register. All right, so if you'll go ahead and speak now about check that, go ahead and use your time wisely. Has the 2 minutes started? And then we'll get an answer to that after you testify.
I have just a few questions that I think would enhance public confidence in your final vote in November if they were answered in a public way with respect to your process. The first is that we know that more than a dozen scholars from Texas colleges and universities nominated themselves or were nominated to serve on your review panels, and they were not given an appointment to those review panels. We could only find a handful of scholars who did serve on your review panels. So one question would be, why were those scholars not appointed to your review panels? Was that solely the decision of the Texas Education Agency or state board members?
Madam
So
Chair,
Kathy, you can sign up as a late registrant to testify on process tomorrow, but right now, it's the content of the books.
Then I will just say that we have provided the Texas Education Agency on a flash drive the full reports that were produced by scholars that we did contract with, and they have identified dozens and dozens of errors in the textbooks under your consideration. And I'm happy to give you all copies, but it was more than 100 pages, so I thought providing the flash drive would be more available, or you can go to tfn.org/history and take a full and close review. But I would like to thank Mr. Bradley for clarifying that we were willing to invest those resources and have scholars, and for clarifying that we did not interfere with their opinions with respect to the text. Thank you. All right.
Good evening. My name is Tony Diaz with the Libre Traficante movement, and I want to start by saying that it really is vital to correct the omissions, the biases, the errors that have been brought up, that will be brought up, for 3 reasons. Ferguson, the Gaza Strip, and the Texas National Guard at the Texas border. And what our education needs to do is cultivate leaders not only who can navigate these cultural conflicts, but who can avoid them. And I would propose to you that not only are you sitting on a powder keg of lawsuits under equal protection, but also...
Madam Chair, point of order.
I'd like my 2 minutes back, because I can interrupt next time.
I have the floor.
Will I get my 2 minutes back, sir?
Yeah, yes, you'll get the rest of your time.
Rather than getting into a policy discussion, the purpose of this hearing today is to address specific errors and deficiencies in our textbooks. And I'm just curious if the speaker has any specific examples of errors in textbooks.
I do. I appreciate the question. I will get to those after my 2 minutes, if I may. May I continue, Ms. Carter?
Yeah, I'm asking her to reset the clock.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead.
And actually get to those because it's a long list. So I would add that we must correct all the cultural deficiencies now in order to avoid other cultural conflicts such as Ferguson, the Gaza Strip, and the Texas National Guard at the border. And this is going to be a major issue because the Department of Justice sued Arizona for not having culturally relevant material. And right now you've got 51% of 5.1 million students who are Hispanic. And I will submit to you that the errors we will address show that they are not getting equal protection. And I think what's going on also, MALDEF has just quantified very, very specifically how that is not being catered to as far as non-English speakers. And I think what's going to happen too, at the most basic level, the workforce of Texas is relying on you to cultivate the 2.5 million Hispanic students to fill the jobs vacated by older Anglos who are retiring. And I would point to you too, that right now in Tucson, you've got young high school students who are suing the state of Arizona because they are not complying with the Department of Justice orders for culturally relevant material, and they went so far as to ban mixed market studies. But I also point out to you that the 3 ringleaders behind that are out of office. Tom Horn voted out in a Republican primary, Huppenthal voted out in a Republican primary, and Jambu is not
Okay,
coming
Mr.
back.
Diaz, I'm not sure this is content in the book, so if you'll please stay germane in your remaining time.
Sure. I will point out then that I am talking about the cultural deficiency for equal protection, and that is not existent in all the further material. And I think what's very vital is that you address that in a very profound way so that we can teach our youth to continue in a multicultural, multimedia era for many different levels. I've lost track of my time, actually.
Well, I actually ended up giving you about a minute and a half extra, so one more sentence, and you did get, actually
Great.
got more than 2 minutes, so.
Okay. That's very kind of you. So, right now, you must go back to the textbooks.
I'm Placido Salazar from the Dr. Hector P. Garcia American GI Forum Organization of Texas. And let me start by asking, isn't it time for all Mexican American students, all American students, especially Mexican American students, to learn that we are recognized as the ethnic group most decorated for bravery per capita? They deserve to learn the truth and to take pride in our accomplishments in defense of our great country. We must stop the need to have to prove that we, along with African American and other minorities, U.S. warriors, are just as American as any American service member. Our children's history books must include factual events with the names of our heroes. Just as important, indigenous and Mexican American contributors to the development, the evolution of the country belong in our history books, along with the contributions of every other ethnic group, especially since our forefathers' existence in this region predated the arrival of Northeasterners by at least 200 years. Other than hatred or discrimination, is there a reason why this is not happening? Is this not one nation under God, indivisible? Now, we don't care what your religious beliefs might be. Your religion is your personal business, but don't try to impose your religious beliefs or your political ideology on our children through their public school textbooks. After all, these are public schools, not schools of theology. Our children's religious education must be left up to their respective parents, far away from every public school. That is the parents' responsibility, not yours. Thank you very much. Please note that I am by no means saying that God's name should not be present in every school event. God is a pledge, is in the pledge we take when committing to die, if necessary, in defense of our country. Welcome to 2014. It's time to put racism aside and to recognize the fact that there is no place for bigotry on this board, which is responsible for the unbiased presentation of the textbooks, which will prepare our students not just for college, but to forge the future of our country, if we are to keep it the United States of America as the strongest country in the world.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Maynard. Mr. Salazar, Mr. Maynard has a question for you. If you want to grab the mic down, there you go.
Okay.
So, Mr. Salazar, thank you for coming today. Did you provide us some specific factual errors for us to deal with?
It's from the beginning of the first textbook through the last one, so it would be very difficult to pinpoint anything. The whole system of education, beginning with kindergarten through college, it's the same corruption of our history being omitted.
Okay, I understand your testimony, but our purpose today And by the way, that the legislature, I mean, as far as what we can do statutorily, is pretty much dictated to us. What we're looking for today is TEKS compliance and factual errors. And so what I'm asking is that were you able to find specifically some factual errors that this board can address, or we can pass along to the publisher?
I did not have that material available to me, so I'm just going by what little I pick up from the internet, from the media, and so that's why I presented my, if you consider it vague, testimony.
Well, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Can we direct staff maybe to help Mr. Salazar as far as maybe where he can actually access that material? Yeah, you can actually access all of these textbooks. We want our process to be very transparent, and so all those textbooks are available for you to look at.
Very well.
And we want you to do that. We invite you to do that. So.
And they're all online now, so we're all having to get used to the new way it's done. So.
Right.
All right. Other questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Unfortunately, not all of us are very computer literate, so I do what I can with what I have.
Yeah.
If I had a better education, I would be able to do better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Salazar.
Thank you.
Madam Chair and members of the committee, my name is Holly Doyle and I'm a sophomore at Texas State University in San Marcos. Thank you for listening to my statement today. I believe that Texas students deserve the best educational resources available, and while I understand the need for textbooks to address a number of important issues in a cursory way so as to cover as much information as possible, I believe the description of the Arab-Palestinian exodus does a disservice to Texas students by not accurately representing history. Let me cite an excerpt from Worldview Software, World History B, mid-1800s to the present, which can be found in Chapter 19. It reads, Arab Palestinians who fled Palestine were disruptive and remain a powerful political force in Jordan and Lebanon. In the context of this entire section, this statement mischaracterizes the nature of the Palestinian exodus, which stemmed from the event scholars refer to as al-Nakba, or the catastrophe. During this time, at least 750,000 Palestinian men, women, and children were expelled from their ancestral homeland. Moreover, the text masks the fact that a large segment of those Arab Palestinians were in fact Christian, and these Christians became refugees when they were forced from their homeland by the creation of Israel in 1948. By describing the Palestinians as disruptive, the text suggests that the Palestinians were to blame for the regional instability rather than those that displaced them. I protest the biased way in which this topic was addressed, and I call for a more accurate, balanced depiction of these historical events. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Perfect timing. Ms. Bradley.
I would like to compliment the young lady, and she gets an A for her homework. She did what we've asked everybody to do.
Told us where to find it. We do appreciate that, Holly.
Good afternoon. It's a privilege to talk to you this afternoon. My name is Kathleen Wellman. I've been a professional historian teaching at SMU for over 30 years, and I just stepped down after my second term as chair. And I think none of you appreciate the tremendous challenge you impose with a 2-minute limit for an academic. I would also like to say that my homework will be late. I was concerned about the introduction of 3 specific standards which introduced ahistorical, misleading, or erroneous conceptions of 18th century political philosophy. I did volunteer to be a textbook reviewer, but I was not selected. I looked at a set of textbooks to see what they did with these 3 particular standards. The first and most ahistorical was the inclusion of Thomas Aquinas and John Calvin as significant political thinkers for the founders. It would have been surprising had textbooks actually included them, since their political views favored monarchy or theocracy, which the founders definitely would have objected to. In fact, the government, American history, and world history textbooks I looked at only treated them as religious thinkers. When a standard added Moses and William Blackstone to Montesquieu and Locke as important political philosophers, perhaps because Blackstone's ideas about unlimited and uncontrolled sovereignty would have been anathema to founders, Blackstone is merely listed. All texts dutifully include Moses, as the first and foremost influence on the American framers, and this epitomizes the wrong-headed idea that the United States was founded on biblical law. This stipulation that the Judeo-Christian tradition has an impact on American law makes Moses the founding fathers, and the textbooks, in fact, credit him with every distinctive feature of American government, from the Constitution to the Declaration of Rights to equal rights and civil law and trial by jury, which is an overt error. Thank you.
To the honorable members of the State Board of Education, my name is Rishi Butata, and I am a member of the Board of Directors for the Hindu American Foundation. Thank you for taking public testimony today on an issue vital to our state's future in order to ensure accuracy and fairness in the educational materials Texas teachers will use to educate students across the state. As my colleague Murali Balaji will discuss in his testimony, many of the proposed materials are factually inaccurate when it comes to Hinduism in ancient India. We have submitted public comment about what those errors are. What I would like to talk about is the impact it has on students in the classroom if inaccurate information is left uncorrected. As a lifelong Texan, I went to school in the Alief Independent School District in Houston. In my social studies classes that covered world history and world geography, my fellow students and I encountered factual errors in the textbooks, ones that led to taunts from students who were less than charitable. Now, as a parent, I want to make sure my child does not encounter similar problems when he enters public school. However, I have heard from Hindu children and teenagers in the school system now that they have to face these similar types of errors, and many of them have been subjected to bullying as a result. For example, last year, a 6th grader in the greater Houston area was subjected to bullying after a class that discussed in a highly skewed manner the pollution levels in the Ganges River, a river that is sacred to Hindus. He endured verbal taunts that he had birth defects and that he was dirty and needed to be cleaned up. Later on, he was physically attacked by a few other students and was held down while his eyebrow was shaved off with a razor. As distressing as that situation was, you can imagine my surprise to find out that the high school world geography materials submitted by Edmentum replicate some of the same exact problems in their presentation of the pollution levels in the Ganges River, with inaccuracies that are likely to cause problems for Hindu students in the classroom. This is just one example of the inaccurate information we at the Hindu American Foundation have found in our reviews. We ask you as the elected representatives that guide our great state's educational system to make sure that the publishers fulfill their obligation to provide accurate materials so that students in the future receive accurate information and bullying is not enabled otherwise. Thank you for your time.
Well, growing up and attending public schools in Texas, I was always invested in my social studies class, no matter who was teaching it. The textbooks were so well written and compelling, it was almost like reading a novel. The textbooks I read were excellent because they were based on an excellent curriculum that more than prepared me for the history classes I take in college now. This is why I was so disappointed when I read through Magruder's American Government textbook and discovered an incredibly biased and offensive political cartoon about affirmative action. This would be less harmful if the textbook presented the cartoon in context of larger issue or provided an opposing viewpoint, but it does neither. The cartoon depicts two aliens viewing Earth from a spaceship, with one of them saying to the other, "Relax, we'll be fine, they've got affirmative action." The cartoon treats affirmative action as a free gift to random people instead of an attempt to address structural inequalities and past wrongs. It does not mention the discrimination faced by women and people of color in employment and higher education for most of the 20th century. It does not mention that marginalized peoples are still in the minority at college campuses and in the boardrooms of Fortune 500 companies. It is not countered with examples of the many ways affirmative action has actually benefited the economy and helps organizations better reflect what America actually looks like. The worst aspect is its implication that marginalized peoples trying to enter the campus or the boardroom are too different and therefore do not belong there. This is especially offensive in light of the state's ethnic makeup, which is 38% Hispanic and 12% African American. Marginalized people are not aliens, they are just as Texan as everyone else.
And contrary to the assertion that support for affirmative action is waning, the U.S. Supreme Court just last year in a 7-1 decision upheld as a compelling state interest the consideration of race as a limited factor in university admissions and opined about its benefits. Simply put, we should not be othering our own children. The cartoons are inappropriate, inaccurate, and far from funny. They should be removed. The second thing I'd like to discuss today are the world geography textbooks, which omit a key part of Latin American history by omitting accounts of resistance by indigenous people against forced religious conversion to Christianity. The state would do a disservice to Latino students, most who have mixed roots, including Spanish and indigenous ones, by omitting this central component to understanding Latino, and particularly in Texas, Mexican-American history and identity. Moreover, all students should be exposed to texts that discuss key parts of the history of Latinos, who comprise the majority of all Texas students. Distorted submissions by Discovery Education, Pearson, and Houghton Mifflin discuss the spread of Christianity among the indigenous in the Americas without an accurate portrayal of the history of bloodshed and resistance behind that conversion.
Okay, today there's less freedom to express ourselves regarding especially Islam. We have a lot of departments in the federal system now that are funded by tax dollars. They're totally unconstitutional. The addendum A is a list of 5 pages, 12-point type of many of these, and they all need to be eliminated because it's pushing an agenda that is un-American. It is disdains our Christian, Judeo-Christian heritage, and it is destructive of our nation. If you feel oppressed by making public comments or standing for Judeo-Christian values, it's because of the oppression, the co-opting that the federal government is currently involved in with regard to the introduction of Sharia law and the Marxist principles that we see.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Jonathan Sines. I'm a licensed attorney here in the state of Texas. I've been practicing law since 2003. Since 2005, I've been focusing on religious liberty issues, dealing with constitutional freedom. I've litigated numerous religious liberty issues. I've been involved in cases at the Texas Supreme Court and been involved in a lot of education policy when it comes to religious liberty, and appeared before this board numerous times. I'm here on behalf of the nonprofit organization Texas Values Action. Met many of you board members, and I was here in 2010 when the standards of which these textbooks were put into place are reflected now in the textbooks today, and saw that process play out, which went over 18 months. About a year and a half I was with this body, as many others were, as things went back and forth regarding those standards. Very public process, a lot of transparency, and you finally came to a conclusion that you voted on. There's one particular textbook and section that I want to talk about while I'm here, and that's in McGraw-Hill, and that's the United States government, and it deals in, this is chapter 15 on constitutional freedoms and lessons 3. And I'm going to use this as an example. There's an organization that's worked with professors, Texas Freedom Network, that has got scholars, and they pointed out some concerns. If you go through their report, so many of them deal with issues related to Christianity, related to Christian heritage, related to religious liberty issues. One of our biggest concerns is we don't want to see publishers be pressured into reducing the significance that Christianity and religious liberty has had in our country. There's no question that it exists and it's been significant. And we don't want to see them, the publishers, be pressured in a position to where they essentially rewrite history. And that's what Texas Freedom Network and some of their scholars are asking to do. And on point, that section, the Texas Freedom Network report admits that the statement that they're criticizing is factually correct. Your duty is about what's factually correct. When they talk about Thomas Jefferson and the wall of separation of church and state, they say that phrase is not used in the Constitution. This is a debate that this body took up in 2010. They're resurrecting arguments that you have already settled and trying to turn them into a discussion about what's proper in the textbooks. They have admitted it's factually correct, case closed.
Mr. Sines, let's see if we have some questions for you, because that was your bell. As you're taking a look at...
Thank you.
Mr. Sines, as you're taking a look, and perhaps you work with history experts to help on this. I know you focus more on religious liberties, but there's been quite a lot of conversation about Moses today, and it's going to be interesting to get perspective on.
Yeah, I ran out of time, and then we had other questions, but that, I know that was a comment by one person. I think I've seen it in other places as well, kind of a degrading and a dismissive approach towards Moses, and I think someone suggested that he never even existed, and so that type of hostility to our religious heritage of our country and to our existence as a people, I think is very troubling, and is not a matter of whether it's factually correct. In the textbook itself, it's a matter of someone's opinion, and I think if this board or publishers use that type of information to make their decision, they're going to have a lot of parents and classroom teachers concerned.
I come today as a Texan. I am a retired history teacher. I taught junior high history, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in the Catholic school, not in the public school. Therefore, I was able to teach, and I have a passion for history. That's why I was so disappointed in the 4 books that I have reviewed. The one that I was most disappointed with, because it was so factually erroneous, was Edmonton. And I'm glad to hear they have withdrawn, but if they are still able to be adopted by school districts, they need to be exposed. In my handout, you can see some of the major factual errors, the major errors that I have found. The publication is riddled with typographical errors. This reveals a lack of knowledge and respect for history. Unit 1, D-Day. Omitted is this fact. General Eisenhower launched the massive invasion of Europe with reliance on God, leading his troops in prayer. President Roosevelt led the nation in prayer over the radio. Unit 2, the cult of domesticity contains bias and factual errors. Most women were happy and fulfilled until they were told they weren't. The Beat Generation contains bias, omission of facts, and half-truths. Students are instructed to read Ginsberg Howl, a pornographic poem that was severely censored and banned for obscenity by the Academy of American Poets. There are many examples of good literature from the 1950s and 60s that should be included. I don't know why they were included in this history book, but these were.
Good afternoon. I'm here to bring attention to some factual errors on the coverage of climate change in the social studies textbooks. So I'm a climate scientist at the University of Texas at Austin. I research causes of climate change and the evidence that we use to test our ideas. I also teach classes within the Department of Geological Sciences at the Jackson School of Geosciences. So I'm a Texan. I have 2 middle school students in Austin, and I think it's critical that kids understand the confidence with which the science of climate change is established. Now, it is difficult for many people to judge the merits of individual findings. However, on the topic of climate change, there is a process that has been set up by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And this process is there to establish or assess the level of confidence that exists on particular questions. So in particular, and what the point I will be making is on the question of is human activity causing climate change? And this is in the McGraw-Hill textbook on world cultures and geography, 6th grade. It states in the Intergovernmental Panel, it quotes, says it's very likely due to human activity. And then it goes on to say many climate scientists disagree with this, with the IPCC on the statement, and proposes kind of 2 alternate findings that are not held in high regard in the scientific community. They're by individuals at a kind of a think tank, an economic think tank, that are not climate scientists, and this poses a risk to how students perceive scientific confidence about climate change.
All right, questions for our testifier? Thank you for being clear and concise in your document.
Esteemed board members, 8 years ago, I spoke to this body and asked you to address a void in our textbooks, the preamble to the U.S. Constitution, and a discussion of its key words. This has been addressed. Thank you. Today, I am requesting that you address another void and infuse into the curriculum my book, Robert's Rules for Kids, a guide to teaching children from kindergarten to the 5th grade, the basics of parliamentary procedure.
Mr. Weisgold, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name.
You didn't.
Today's hearing is on content in the history textbook, so we need to stay germane to that.
This is the map of Texas in 1720. It is a wonderful map that the children need to learn. The Indian rancherias of the Coahuiltecans, and then you can see already the missions. And there are people with great suffering and blood build these missions that hopefully they will become a war heritage because the sweat and the blood over Coahuiltecans, 200 clans. And to end it, there's also, I give you the list of the governors and officials of each mission, all the train marking like shoemakers, carpenters, architects, all Indians, okay? They left their old rancherias to become mission Indians. And those were the Coahuiltecas, okay? And to end, I put you the Santos Sacramentos, and it says very clearly, to many nations that live in the Rio Grande and the Rio San Antonio, and they say the Pacuache, the Tibijaya, the Pamaque, the Borrados. These are ancient people, very aboriginal, like in comparison like the one in Australia. And we want inclusiveness, and you have what I said there, Coahuilteca.
Okay, Ms. Torres, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking for the specific textbook that you are addressing.
Well, I know there's a McGraw Hill and the other ones. I had problems to open the Adobe. I had really problems to do it, and then, that was Sunday. I read all the other PD files, and I didn't see Coahuiltecans.
Okay.
And I was crying.
All right, so.
Because that's the original ones from Central South Texas and Eastern Texas. They were the real people. The real McCoy. It's not a fairy tale.
Right. Madam Chairman, under the forwarding, it will really go to all of the publishers, so whoever doesn't have it would have an opportunity to address it. Is that correct?
I hope, Ms. Knight, I answered you correct. Your answer is satisfactory. Is that we would like, by November, the certification, we would like that these textbooks are assuring us, like this one, that is the Department of Interior. If you read San Antonio Mission's War Heritage, it's very prestigious because the blood and sweat of our Indians to build every church, like the Alamo, that is San Antonio de Valero, and that is actually not the shrine, it's a church. And the precedent is that they built it with blood and sweat. Okay, so I hope I answered your question and the book. We don't want these books to be printed until you are assuring us that our clans Coahuiltecans or the word Coahuilteca is included. And
Ms. Torres,
the clans we have.
Let me clarify something though. Remember, let me just say what I've been saying all day. Publishers are only required to cover 50% of the curriculum standards. It's very frustrating.
But I'm
cover
gonna
50%.
I understand.
If they choose to include the information you're showing, that's up to them.
Those are the first ones. You insulting us. And you spitting on our faces.
Get the legislature to take it back to 100%.
In the state of Texas.
Good afternoon, I'm Robert Bonfalk. I'm a retired United Methodist minister, mental health case worker. I've got a history degree from Southwestern University. I first testified on the textbook hearings in 1978. I was looking for what was not in the textbooks. In 1978, there were 2 high school American history textbooks that did not have Neil Armstrong or America's landing on the moon. One of the textbooks then had only 2 pages of the Vietnam and 1 paragraph on Watergate. But by 1984, all of the history textbooks had sufficient information or a chapter on the Vietnam War and Watergate. Like the Bible, American history textbooks should include the good, the bad, and the ugly, warts and all. A nation grows and matures when it is able to recognize and correct and learn from mistakes made in the past. That sometimes the truth hurts. The Bible included everything, although we know that some was left out. All of American history textbooks today still have left out Jim Jones and the Jonestown mass suicide of 1978. Now that is part of American history, and students need to learn how easily people can be brainwashed and manipulated by a religious cult, because it happened several years later too. Today's American history textbooks should include tragedies and unpleasant events. They should include slavery, Kent State shootings, 3 Mile Island, Haymarket Affair, Oklahoma City bombing, David Koresh and the Branch Davidians in Waco, the Challenger and Columbia Space Shuttle disasters, Columbine and Sandy Hook school shootings, and especially the Cuban Missile Crisis that almost started a nuclear war in 1962. And they should also be old enough and mature enough to learn that President Clinton was impeached by the Republicans because of sex.
Hello, Chairwoman Cargill and members of this board. I'm Zach Coplin, and I'm a board member of the Greater Houston Area Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Thank you for allowing me to speak today on behalf of Americans United about the proposed social studies textbooks. Americans United works to preserve religious liberty to the fullest extent possible in society, and we believe these proposed social studies textbooks would undermine rather than uphold the constitutional principle of separation in church and state. It's concerning that 2 of the proposed textbooks provide misleading information about the U.S. Constitution and the separation of church and state, and several others overemphasize the influence of Judeo-Christian legal traditions on the founding of our government. The proposed textbooks have many problems, including a passage that inaccurately applies Moses' 10 Commandments to the founding of America, and discussion of the separation of church and state that emphasizes state court cases governing prayers in public schools, while de-emphasizing the U.S. Supreme Court rulings that establish such prayers are unconstitutional. Many of the proposed world history and geography textbooks fail to provide accurate information about other religions aside from Christianity, and several of these textbooks include negative portrayals of Islamic faith and Muslims. Our schools must avoid sending messages to our students that one religious belief is superior or preferred over another. The social studies curriculum proposed today overstates the alleged biblical sources for our history, our law, government, and morals, without providing an accurate account of prohibitions on government involvement in religion, and it would fail to teach students about equally valid points of view outside the Judeo-Christian worldview. It's a duty of public schools to educate the children of the state, not promote any particular religious viewpoint. Because we believe these portions of the proposed materials would do more harm than good to Texas students, we ask that publishers fix the errors immediately. And also, in my capacity as an individual no longer representing Americans United, I'd like to point out that these books contain many more flaws, not just the ones over separation of church and state and religion, but other ones including attacks on climate science and global warming that should be fixed too. So please don't end up getting the history books yourselves by harming our students' education. Thank you so much for allowing me to testify.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Copeland, thank you for coming out. Did you, in addition to your testimony here, have you submitted?
So I would suggest the TFN has done an amazing review of hundreds of pages that outline everything that needs to be seen. So I'd say that's the best reference point there is.
All right, thank you.
My name is Antonio Diaz, and I'm spokesperson for Texas Religious Council. And again, our people are being, I don't think omitted, but more like degraded. Our founding fathers were not Judeo-Christian Europeans. Our founding fathers were the original people of this land, the indigenous people of the Americas. We had our own ways, our own culture, and our own religion until we were militarily occupied and displaced. Genocide is what our people have faced since the 14th century. I heard a gentleman say something about Islam having killed over 250 million people since the 14th century. Well, Judeo-Christians have done the same globally. Here in the Americas, at least 100 million indigenous people have died since the arrival of the Europeans on our lands. And our history is butchered and omitted in these books. So I'm against it, and I would say do not accept these books until they are corrected. In one of these books, I'm not sure, I think it's Pearson, where it states that the Incas were a welfare state and were well on their demise even before the Spaniards arrived on our shores. And that is a bold-faced lie. The Incas, as well as the Mayan, created corn, which today is still a major staple of this nation, and it benefits all people. But yet, our people are not credited with being a civilized, culturally rich people. We're called savages. We're called animals. We're called soulless until the Christians arrive on our shores. And again, if the agenda is a Christian right agenda that is degrading all other religions and imposing itself upon us, we're used to it already. We're used to it because we're still militarily occupied. This is our land, and our ancestors and the founding fathers of these lands were not Judeo-Christian. They were indigenous people.
Well, Madam Chair and board members, thank you very much for spending time and opening up to the public like this. It's a very laborious process on your part. In uniform, I can only comment more about defending the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic, and military doctrine. I would like to fix two things, or propose a fix for two things. First is the source of the Middle East conflict. My War College paper is on why there's no peace in the Middle East. I've heard it being displaced all the way back to the Romans, the fact that our English brothers messed up and reimposed Israel. The fundamental fight between those two people is a family. They all claim Abraham. It's the strain in the Torah, same in the Quran, same in ours. Abraham had two children. One born by the firstborn son, which is going to be Ishmael, which is the descendants of most of the Arabs, and the other one is Isaac, was the descendants of the Jews. That family split apart. It is a family feud. I've fought both with the Israelis and with the Arabs, and I've asked the Arabs, I go, why is it you hate the Israelis? And they go, well, those younger children who try to steal the promises of their father and throw their mothers out to die. So I go, good heavens, it was 4,000 years ago. But they believe it, whether we do or not. And I've also fought alongside with Jews, and I go, why is it that you hate the Arabs? And they go, those illegitimate stepsons from the bastard stepmother who tries to steal the promises of the father. The land that ISIS is trying to obtain and grab is the same land that was promised to Abraham. So what I would like to propose is that I send my Air War College paper to you, whether you'd like to include the diagrams that show the land listed by Abraham. That's the fundamental root of the fight. It really isn't who's displaced here or there. It's a family feud. They're cousins. Unfortunately, that's the truth of it. The only other thing I wanted to say is that the Constitution of the United States is the most foreign studied document in the history of the world. It is today. It is the founding of 143 different nations. It has unleashed curiosity, creativity, innovation, determination that has made us the freest, most people in the world. Most of some of these texts say words that are contrary to our founding fathers, degrading them as old men, slave owners, to the point where it aligns with communist revolutionary doctrine. And that is that we would then overthrow our own country. What are your questions for me?
And sir, thank you for your service. I'm sure we've had other military today, but you're the first in uniform. But thank you to all of our veterans here today. Mrs. Nye?
Did you say that you were sending your paper?
Yes, ma'am. I'll send my War College paper to the team.
Mr. Mercer?
I just want to thank you again for your service and recognize the Air Force through my father served. So thank you for that. And I can't think what I'm allowed to ask you because being in uniform, I will tell you this, that I've seen too many efforts, most recently, where people have excluded military history from United States history. Would that be appropriate or inappropriate, or can you answer that?
Sir, I agree very much with our previous gentleman said. We've got to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly, the things that we've done well and the things we've done poorly. I would say in our country, on our behalf of our military, we are the first nation in the history of the world to never extract anything from people we defeat, or enslave them, or demand anything from them. We're the first country ever to go, we're going to rebuild you. The only other thing I can make commentary about the historical context in the Federalist Papers, and there is a lot of controversy about Moses. Absolutely good correction there on Moses. However, the Federalist Papers say that they did start the separation of powers with the Levitical premise, which was written by Moses.
Good day. My name is Ron Rocha. I am a direct descendant of the indigenous people enslaved to build the first mission in Texas. We have a gross error in the books here when we refer to someone as Hispanic or Latino. When you refer to them, it is the N-word of our race of people. We are not named after a language of Spanish or Latin. We were here long before the Europeans set foot on the American continent. When Cortés arrived here, he was greeted by the Mexica that he named, that he noted in his journals as the Mexica, the Native Americans of the continent, that the Spaniards called Mexicanos. When the Anglo arrived in the United States, he killed all the Indians and imprisoned them, but it is not said that he mixed with the Indians and created a new race of people to obliviate them and enforce his religious beliefs on them. Our religious beliefs were enforced on us by either choosing the Bible or having our heads cut off. The Christian morals and values that founded this country have totally excluded us as a people and label us Hispanics, Latinos, Chicanos, whatever you want, any social label except Native Americans. We are human beings. We are not savages. We do not want our children to live in a multiple choice society where they can pick anything they want to be except American. We need, and the textbooks must identify us as Native Americans. The mestizo thing, it never happened. The population of Spain was 1 million when Cortés arrived here, and the population of the American continent was 100 million. The mix never happened. It never took place. We have been lied to. The textbooks have lied to us. And we pray that y'all will take note of this and stop this and recognize us as human beings and as a people, as a Native American people, dignified of that respect. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Humphrey, and I serve as the Assistant Regional Director for the Austin region of the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. Please forgive me, I sat here all day and I'm not feeling really good at the moment, but I wanted to get my testimony in. We thank the board for the opportunity to speak about the proposed social studies textbooks for Texas public school students. The ADL is a human rights, civil rights, and education organization. We are dedicated in purpose and in program to combating anti-Semitism and all forms of bigotry. The ADL has offices in Austin, Dallas, and Houston. In serving a statewide constituency, the ADL has perspective from El Paso to Marshall, from Wichita Falls to the Valley. For over 100 years, we have been an ardent advocate for securing justice and fair treatment for all. As a Jewish organization that provides Holocaust education to teachers and students, we understand the vital importance of accurately imparting historical knowledge of human prosecution and oppression to the next generation, which serves as a vehicle to hinder further oppression. This accuracy is obtained by presenting materials in an objective manner and allowing conclusions to be made by the student, not to be projected by the text. We urge the State Board of Education to critically review the submitted text for objective presentation. A fundamental component of teaching history is getting the facts correct. We've talked a lot about facts today. Some of the submitted textbooks exhibit an ideological bias that is not appropriate for the public school classroom. For instance, in Harcourt's World History, the text states, Because one of Jesus' basic principles was the equality of all people in the eyes of God, equality before the law became a central belief within the Judeo-Christian tradition. This statement assumes that students come into the classroom with an understanding of Jesus' basic principles. It also begs a theological debate about where the notion originated, either in Judaism or Christianity. I include several other examples at the end of this statement to be entered into the record where the material found in the textbooks contains inaccuracy or bias that could lead the student to believe in factual inaccuracies. These examples are merely illustrations of the harm that could come from selecting social studies texts that fail to present history objectively.
Good afternoon. My name is Emil Lester. I'm an associate professor in political science at the University of Mary Washington in Virginia. My review of 7 proposed U.S. government textbooks revealed concerns in a number of areas, including religious influences on the founders and free enterprise. I'll focus on religious influences on the founders. The true story of how religion shaped America today is rich and inspirational. Without the evangelical Great Awakening of the 1700s, the American Revolution may not have happened. Without the efforts of that pious Baptist, Roger Williams, securing religious freedom would have taken much longer. It's a shame that with so much to celebrate about the relationship of American history and the Judeo-Christian tradition, that 5 of the 7 textbooks up for adoption felt the need to exaggerate and invent claims about this relationship. The Pearson text, for instance, claims to find the roots of democracy in the Judeo-Christian tradition and the rule of Moses and Solomon. I know one board member likes to challenge people to find the phrase separation of church and state in the Constitution. I'd like to challenge you to find the word democracy in the Bible. Suggesting that King Solomon was a Democrat is like describing Ronald Reagan as a communist. I'm Jewish, and I believe Solomon and Moses were great leaders. They were not democratic leaders. The Perfection, Houghton Mifflin, and McGraw-Hill texts claim in different ways that the Ten Commandments influence the founders' views on law and the Constitution. This is like saying that because Rick Perry supports some federal spending, he and Barack Obama are equally tax and spend liberals. Just because 2 people or things have a little in common doesn't mean they're the same. The Bible has laws, and so did the early American Republic, but John Adams, in a famous letter to Thomas Jefferson, went out of his way to deny the Ten Commandments influence our legal system. If these passages remain in the textbooks, you are jeopardizing the reputation of both the founders and the Bible. Because if the text may claim that students can show are false with a basic Google search, why should students trust anything the text or teachers say about the true influence of Judeo-Christian views on the founders?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Murali Balaji. I'm the Director of Education and Curriculum Reform for the Hindu American Foundation. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the time to offer my testimony as a scholar and community member on this textbook adoption, which is of the utmost importance for Texas students and their teachers. You have an unenviable task before you, and I commend you all for your dedication to ensure our textbooks are fair and accurate. I'm speaking today because despite updates to scholarship on religion and history, most of the textbook submissions are factually inaccurate when it comes to information about Hinduism and on ancient India. Several of the proposed textbooks in world geography and world history, for instance, are using information that has been debunked or isn't grounded in substantiated evidence. One key example is the Aryan invasion theory in Discovery's submission, which has been outdated for at least 40 years. As a result, the errors will continue to hinder Texas teachers' ability to get accurate information to their students, and as a result, prevent Texas from having the kind of top-notch education we all know it can possess. We counted 122 factual errors with a team of scholars whose specialty is history and religion. HAF submitted a spreadsheet of these factual errors, including the specific passages. We have also submitted these errors as well as suggested rewordings from the scholars directly to the publishers.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Patty Quincy, and I'm an attorney representing the Texas chapter of the American Federation of Teachers. And first off, we'd like to thank the Texas Freedom Network for seeking out distinguished scholars on the topic of social studies to examine all of the textbooks before you so thoroughly and independently. And after reviewing the report, Writing to the Standards, which was released last week by TFN, we conclude that the SBoE should rely much more on subject matter practitioners, both in standard setting and in textbook review. And if you hadn't had a chance to read the report, I know several of you were asking for some specifics and where some of the problems are located. This report does an excellent job of being very specific about its methodology, its reasoning, and why certain things are appropriate or not appropriate. The problems that have been identified, it seems, throughout the day are traceable to the standards that you all passed in 2010. And those are the same standards that the conservative Fordham Institute in 2011 stated are, quote, politicized distortion of history, marked by, quote, misrepresentations at every turn. We're glad that you made some improvements to the process in February of 2013, but the teachings on which these textbooks are based were completed in 2010, and that was before many of the improvements to the process had a chance to take effect. And again, we feel that the standard setting did not rely enough on practitioners' knowledge and judgment.
Madam
And
Chair, point of order.
There's a couple of examples I'm about to
Madam
give.
Chair, point of order.
Mr. Bradley.
I know it's late, maybe she's the last speaker, but let's try to stay and keep the discussion germane to specific errors in the textbooks, please.
Do you have some errors in the
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay.
And my point is that the errors can be traced back to the standards. And one example is the concern over states' rights in the abstract as opposed to the defense of slavery was given as undue weight in the text. And as a result, we see in the textbooks that the Texas standards and the textbook influence shows an airbrushed portrait of Confederate motivation to appeal to modern sensibilities, it seems. This is a great disservice to students. In the Pearson book, there is a great distortion of the Gilded Age and description of that. Pearson dismisses the critique of the Gilded Age as cynical and uncritically celebrates the Gilded Age economic policies that, quote, made daily life easier and more fun for many people, end of quote. And there's a little bit more on that. We think that there's time to clean up these standards. You've improved the process since they were drafted, and there's still time to improve it before we get textbooks on them.